I'm Sarah Lacy.
And I'm Paul Carr.
And welcome to Why Is This News? As you can see, we're a bit more casual today. Not planning on screaming at each other about Egypt.
We're the best of friends.
Sort of. Yeah. What are we going to talk about today, Paul?
I was just reading something that you wrote on TechCrunch, in fact. You've just written a post about...
It makes you and 3 others.
Yeah. So me, you, and your husband have just been reading a post on TechCrunch.
He doesn't read what I
write. About Tencent, the huge Chinese company buying their way into the American gaming industry. Mm-hmm. So perhaps you could talk about the acquisition.
Well, it was an acquisition of an LA-based company called Riot Games. Mm-hmm. That isn't so much playing in like the Apple platform or the Facebook platform, but the in-browser game platform, which we don't give quite as much attention on TechCrunch. One of the benchmark partners told me it was the fastest he'd ever seen a company get to 100 million revenue run rate. So, wow. Company doing incredibly well out of LA. And the interesting thing about this, other than the whole Tencent thing, which I wrote about it, is, but beyond that, it's the third interesting LA company I've heard about, or actually the fourth interesting LA company I've heard about in the last couple of weeks.
So there was Machinima, I don't even know.
Machinima, which is doing close to... I think close to 400 million in monthly video views, which is astounding.
So they allow people who are, for people who aren't gamers, they allow people who are playing video games to basically record their gameplay and share it with others, which I had no idea was a thing, but apparently it's huge.
I know, and it's so funny.
I've seen that famous clip where there was the guy in World of Warcraft or whatever it was, who goes running into the thing and everyone else. But I didn't realize there was a
Well, there's this whole creative element where people play different roles inside the game, and people are basically like producing small movies within it, and they have the real-time rendering engine of these sophisticated game engines, so they can actually do like basically animated movies and animated shorts in a really short
animated
period of time.
Theater.
Yeah,
that's kind of brilliant.
What's so funny about that is, Riot, we've hardly written about on TechCrunch. Machinima, a huge company that had never been written about before on TechCrunch. I actually didn't find many mentions on any of the tech blogs. And, I had people, completely giving me shit in the comments, well, it always happens, of saying, how do you think this is a new phenomenon? And like, first of all, I didn't say it was a new phenomenon, but it's like, it's the people who are close to this world are like, this has been going on forever. Yeah. How is this new to you? But like,
to the vast majority of people, it's nothing.
It's like
and not just to the Valley, I mean to anyone who's not involved in the community. And yet it's like 400 million video views, and yet outside nothing.
But I think it's also a Valley LA thing. I mean, I think LA is really has several really interesting companies, and to some degree, they've gotten over this. We have to always be competing with the Valley. We got to prove something.
They're doing
because none of these companies cared about being on TechCrunch.
Right, they're doing exactly, and perhaps it's telling them that Tencent, being a Chinese company, because this is what you often say about China, which is they don't give a shit what the Valley's doing. They're just doing their thing. They know what they're good at. They're building these enormous companies with hundreds of millions of users and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, or the equivalent, and no one cares. And no one here knows about them, and no one in there cares that we don't know about them, and the world carries on turning. But you made another interesting point, which is the fact that they're deliberately, Tencent deliberately released the news to make sure that no one in Silicon Valley would care. They made it sound like the most boring story. It's just like they had to announce the acquisition because it's like, but they didn't even paint it as an acquisition.
Because Bloomberg had found out about it and had said before, so they kind of had to. So they waited till 6 o'clock on a Friday before the Super Bowl. Kind of snuck, just basically called it, claimed it as more of another funding round than an acquisition.
They just these guys, whatever. We just so it's interesting to go from LA to China then, that this might be the beginning of Chinese companies, this thing that certainly you've been talking about and a few others have been talking about Chinese companies now having the money and the interest to start just basically stealth acquiring bits of...
Yeah, and the thing is Tencent's been doing it. We had a bunch of Chinese execs too from Tencent in the office a couple months ago, and I was saying, when are you guys really going to get serious about buying some Valley companies? A topic that Mary Meeker of Kleiner Perkins, who's been one of the more aggressive people at really spending time in China and understanding it, she and I had talked about this when she got named to Kleiner Perkins, and she was like, oh, I think that's years off. I don't think that's really coming in a big way anytime soon. I asked these Tencent guys about it, and they were like, we've done a ton of acquisitions no one knows about. And they're just like, we don't want, they're small, and we're doing them small because we didn't want anyone to know about it. And like I talked to some other sources this weekend who are like, look, these guys have the money to come in and buy EA. Like they have the money to come in and do huge deals, and they're still like, this is the biggest deal we've seen. Like, they're still going to probably not be bigger than this range. I mean, they're a very deliberate company.
That's a good way to do it, because obviously if they came in and bought EA, then suddenly it would be like...
Why would you?
China, For a start, everything I'd heard about China's business savvy would be confusing to me. But no, but if they came in and did a massive like acquisition, everyone would be like, whoa, watch out for the... and there'd suddenly be a thing. Whereas, and that's of no benefit to them, because it drives prices up, it freaks people out, it starts being a thing.
Well, and the last thing you want, I mean, and I feel, a tiny bit bad for like putting such a spotlight on it, because certainly Riot's audience doesn't want to be like, it's one thing when you're, a very like edgy gaming company to say, oh, we've sold out to the man, we've sold out to Microsoft, but like we've sold out to the biggest company in China. Like, you could see people, kind of spazzing out.
Yeah, well, hopefully they will now that you've written about it. Hopefully you've destroyed them.
Back to the LA thing. I mean, we've given so much attention and so much credence to this big startup world that's kind of blossomed in New York. And, I think it absolutely has. But some of the companies we're seeing in LA that no one's writing about are putting up way bigger numbers
we're also
than some of these New York companies.
Not only are we giving New York a lot of credit, we're also actively dismissing LA. There's a lot of like LA, you say LA, and to a lot of people, and I bet to a lot of people watching this who, especially those in the Valley, will have immediately just scoffed and thought MySpace. And if they're feeling particularly mean-spirited, will have thought Mahalo. We'll be like, because it's so easy to...
But those are two of those, and what's sad is those were two of the successes out of LA.
Yeah,
I mean, when I called Machinima the best tech company since LA tech company since MySpace, I meant that as a compliment. I mean, MySpace had one of the biggest page views, absolutely transformed the web. They just screwed it up later, embarrassingly.
Exactly.
But they built an amazing thing.
But it speaks to the sort of smugness in the Valley to be just like, well, what have they ever done? And we don't care.
Yeah.
And it's increasingly evident that perhaps LA doesn't really care what we think. And equally, we should be paying more attention.
Well, I think the point is, it's the companies that don't care what we think that are doing well, which I don't think is an accident.
And certainly in the gaming company, certainly with like Machinima, or they don't need to care.
Right.
Like their audience, well, some of their audience probably does read TechCrunch, but their audience is in the gaming community, and that's what. And
I mean, another one that's totally different and out of the gaming sphere is Shoedazzle, who I've written about, who has this Kim Kardashian's a co-founder of, and it basically allows like celebrities to easily design shoes. It gives people this kind of monthly club where you go and someone is like a buyer has like picked everything that you want. And in another interesting China connection, Shoedazzle does all its own manufacturing. I mean, this isn't like a guilt-like aggregator
Kim Kardashian
deal.
sitting with sequins and beads, sticking them on shoes.
If Kim Kardashian was a Chinese woman in a factory, yes. But they actually manufacture everything in China, and that allows them to do this. And it's interesting that there's all these weird sort of tie-in in industries that LA is endemically poised to do well. I mean, LA really gets, fashion, celebrity endorsement of fashion. And so it's like, I love seeing, I mean, it's kind of like we talked about with Groupon before. Groupon, it's not a surprise to me, came out of a city like Chicago because they really were aiming for, mom and pop small businesses and people who wanted to save money, and not the typical like wives of VCs, let's say, or wives of wealthy entrepreneurs. And I think in a way, Foursquare is very of New York, right? I mean, it's about total urban density and young people going around wanting to find the hotspots. And I think these LA companies are very out of LA. I think it's really exciting.
Well, this is what I've always said about, this is what I was saying recently, particularly about Europe, which is, I think, rather than being obsessed with Silicon Valley, the important thing is for each city and each region and each continent even to decide what it does well and to own that. And LA clearly knows it knows celebrity and it knows gaming and it knows entertainment really well. So, but to your point, you said the other week in The Telegraph, it's time for everyone to stop obsessing with Silicon Valley because in fact, this whole decentralization thing is happening, and it's clearly happening. LA is becoming more successful. New York is doing pretty well in some areas. China is clearly coming into its own, and it's becoming potentially much more interesting and relevant to the future of what happens in this sector than Silicon Valley. So it's kind of, I think this is another move towards let's just all accept that this is happening.
Right.
And that anyone this ties in rather neatly to your new book. But let's just accept that anyone who still thinks that Silicon Valley is the center of the world, and if it's not happening in the Valley, it doesn't matter, is an idiot at this point. Which is only good news for our show about things that are happening outside the Valley. It's come full circle. Look at that.
We'll try to argue next week on Why Is This News.
No, we won't.